Bulavinaka, namaste, and good evening to all of you watching on Fijivillage. Tonight, we have a special guest with us, joining us from Sydney, Australia. Arrnott Olssen, who was born in Fiji, raised in Fiji, and then went on to stay in Sydney, where he's based at the moment. Arnott, good evening.
Good evening.
Good to join you. How's Sydney?
Sydney's in lockdown at the moment, where they've just got extended to the end of August, and they're saying we might be in lockdown till September, but not sure. Fingers crossed we're not.
You're smiling, so some things must be going right for you.
Listen, I can get coffee, and that's all. As long as we can still get our coffees, I think Sydney people are okay.
Now, we'll talk about COVID a bit more later. Arnott, you were born in Fiji, grew up in Fiji. A lot of people would want to know about Arnott and growing up in Fiji. What can you tell us?
Well, so I grew up with a single mom. And I might add a little disclaimer there. My actual name should read Arrnott Salesi Olssen, which is what's on the birth certificate. I grew up with a single mom. We grew up in Nambour. And then from there, moved to McCoy. And financially, we didn't have a lot, but I don't think as a child I realized that, because my mom sort of instilled in us this idea to dream big. And so even when I was in school, I went to school at Gospel Primary all the way through till high school. Even while I was in school, I was always pushing myself, like at enter singing competitions, or I remember winning the inter-secondary school oratory competition, forcing a friend of mine like here to join the debate association, because I was always about doing extracurricular activities. And I think even as a small kid in Fiji, I used to think creatively and think out the box. And I always felt maybe a little odd in Fiji, but I never felt out of place.
Now, growing up in Fiji, of course, you spent your early years in Fiji. What are
Yeah.
some of the highlights when you were in Fiji?
Listen, I think as a child in Fiji, one of the biggest things that I loved was, um, the food. And I think coming back recently to Fiji, there's this huge opportunity that's been missed in a lot of the hotels that I stayed in, where a lot of people actually don't find out what Fijian food is all about. And I think like my love for food is still strong here, and I do a lot of stuff around food. Um, but growing up, that essence of like where food is love and food is people, I think that was instilled in me. But I think one of the biggest things is the resilience. Even when we had nothing, there was always hope. And I think Fijians are the same anywhere in the world. There's always a resilience. And as soon as you say to someone you're from Fiji, they go, "Oh, Fijian people are amazing." And I think that's one of the biggest stories a lot of people tell is every time they come to Fiji on holidays. I've got a lot of friends that go to Fiji on holidays, well, used to, and have gone every year. And it's because of the people, and they keep coming back because of the people.
Now, people must be wondering why we are talking to you. Of course, you moved on to Sydney and established yourself there. Can you talk to us about you moving to Sydney and your journey there?
So finished high school in Suva, and then moved to Sydney. I'd done Form 7 at Gospel, moved to Sydney in 1995. My mom was here, and she'd been here since 89. Um, so we came, and she came because she thought it would offer us different opportunities. And especially with me, she always said I needed sort of a creative outlet, because even as a child, like they'd go to bed, go have a little nap on Sunday afternoon after church and after lunch, and she'd wake up and I would have like cut something and created like a puppet show, or tried to cook up a dish I saw in a book somewhere. So I was always creative. So she thought that coming to Australia would afford us that opportunity to be creative. And we moved here, and instantly I wasn't. I think I felt a little displaced still. But once I found my way, I then discovered that I could sing here. So I auditioned for a television show back in 2000, which was one of the originals. It was called Pop Stars. auditioned for Pop Stars, made it through, got very well known through it. That was the first one that I did. I'd written a song that got played everywhere. And then in 2004, I re-auditioned for it again, and this time it was for solo stars, and got down to the last four. So through that, I then moved into fashion. From fashion, I then created this website called Rogue Home. So I started a website, which was a lifestyle site, which talked about fashion and food and fitness. And it's been going now for 8 years. And the Rogue Home site has afforded me the ability to be a content creator and influencer of sorts. I don't really like that word, but in Australia, you sort of classed as an influencer, and it's given me the opportunity to be on television, to sing at different places, and to sing alongside people like Boy George and other amazing artists.
Now, with Rogue Home, you were saying it's still ongoing at the moment.
Yes.
What did you discover after you started that?
My biggest thing after starting Rogue Home, and 5 years in going to events, was there was still a disconnect between publishing or websites here and the multicultural Sydney I lived in. And that used to irk me, because I'd go to an event and I'd probably be the only person of color at an event. I'd look around and I'm like, there's myself in a sea of Caucasian people. So the Rogue Home a couple of years ago started to transition and become Rogue La Vie, which was both male and female content. And that officially launched last year. And I was partnering up with another friend of mine from Fiji to sort of start to create it. And then in lockdown, it's now transitioned again. So the website Rogue La Vie has now become something a little bit different.
Now, through your creations, I believe that you also shared that you have traveled to other parts of the world.
Yes. Yeah. So I hadn't been back to Fiji for 21 years. And in 2018, I actually came back to Fiji with Fujifilm. They had a launch. And it was great to come back, because I'm not sure why I just hadn't been back and reconnect, I think. And when I came back in 2018, I realized how much I'd missed it and how much of a connection I had to it. So not just in terms of culture, but in terms of food as well. And it really reignited my love for food again, because I was like, there's so much in the Pacific that no one knows about. But then also from there, I've gone around the world to Europe with a couple of brands. And everywhere I go, the one thing that people will say, "Oh, where are you from?" They'll say Australia. They're like, "Oh, yeah, but you look a little different." And it's like, well, originally I'm from Fiji, and we go, "Oh, Fiji," and they always think about the people, and they always think about how happy they are. So I suppose that's why I'm always joyous.
They always say when a lot of people, when they go abroad or settle abroad, and they still reminisce about their country of birth and
Yeah.
thinking about going back to their roots. How strong are you with that?
When I came back in 2018, I realized how much I missed it and how the essence of that was missing from me. It's really hard to explain, because it's not a tangible thing. It's now that I'm reconnected, now that I've reconnected back to Fiji, it's actually given me inspiration, ideas, and a bit of a drive to share a lot of things. So, for example, this year, I've always thought that people from the Pacific, a lot of times we hide our, we sort of hide our feelings, and we don't share a lot of things. And coming out of lockdown last year, I realized there were a lot of men that weren't talking about what it is that they were facing or things that were keeping them down. So I created a little event called Men Let's Talk, and was hosted by the Langham Sydney, one of Sydney's 5-star hotels. Hugo Boss were a partner with us. And we had some amazing men on the panel. We had, the GWS Giants captain for the team, where the head of marketing for Hugo Boss Australasia. And we had this amazing gentleman called Iqbal, is originally from Fiji, and he's created a company here called Endeavor and Empower. And basically, they provide free therapy and free counseling for people that need it. And we had him on the panel sharing. So it's made me realize that anything I do has to have a connection to helping people, because I think that's a part of what we are from Fiji, is we're always about, sharing and caring and doing things for others. So, Rogue La Vie has now become it's grown, but it's grown into something that's about providing opportunity, but also caring and helping people where we can.
It's also about giving back to Fiji. And I
Yes.
believe that your new initiative that you have now embarked on is looking at that. Talk to us about your new initiative that you're going into from tonight.
So in lockdown, here in Sydney, 5 weeks ago, the first week was a bit hard. It really shook me because there was so much happening, and all of a sudden there was nothing. I then sat down, but as I said before, like, we were very resilient people. So I sat down and I looked at my site, and I decided that it was going to turn into a monthly digital magazine. So officially this evening, we go live with the first issue 1. And we're hoping that through this platform, we'll be able to offer brands, companies in Fiji and across the Pacific and across the world, an opportunity to tell their story. So we're really focused on sharing stories from people of color. I want this to be a multicultural digital platform, because I still think there is opportunities that have been missed out on some of the bigger publishing companies, where they're missing out on showcasing multicultural stories and faces and people. So we'd love to, like, if people have a recipe they want to share with us, email us your recipe. If you think there's someone amazing in Fiji or in the Pacific that's helping, or, that's doing something amazing, share the profile with us. If you're a brand and you want your story to be told, share it with us, because there is an opportunity for us to tell those stories. And then also for young people that, like me back in the day, may have dreamed of doing something like this. This is an opportunity for them to, photograph things, become a writer, practice their writing. And we'll be looking at these stories and hopefully sharing them to people around the world, because the digital platform is amazing. It doesn't just reach Sydney or Australia, it's worldwide.
What's your objective? Of course, it's not just an Australian-based initiative. It's an initiative where you're thinking about Fiji. You may be thinking about the rest of the Pacific. Where are you thinking this will take you?
Well, I mean, my biggest thing as well is, I know, for example, Fiji at the moment, tourism is a huge part of what makes the economy tick. And I find that sometimes here, as a Fijian who now lives in Australia, when I do see the stories being told about Fiji, to attract visitors, because I think that's the biggest thing, is like, I'm always advocating for, for people to go to Fiji for a holiday, because, I know that if the more people that go there, the more work it creates for the people there. So we're hoping that with this, we'll be able to tell direct stories, of brands and businesses straight to the people. And I think that's the biggest thing, like being a brand that's based in Sydney, but that's connected back to Fiji. We can tell the story from the Fijian perspective, rather than it going through the lens of, say, for an Australian person that might think they understand what Fiji is about. And like, I'm a huge, like, in the digital magazine, I've shared the, fish curry recipe. Because I love it, but also, I think people forget that the food is a bit like a great way of bringing people together. So my biggest, I think, out of this, my biggest goal is to, share stories that people may have not heard or seen before about Fiji, the Pacific. And then I think there's some amazing stories of Fijians all around the world as well that have done amazing things that we don't ever hear about.
Tourism is hurting at the moment for Fiji. Fiji
Yeah.
is hurting because of that, because of the pandemic. The second wave of COVID-19 has claimed many lives. And of course, we've had widespread community transmission in Suvarnasori. Of course, evidence of community transmission and growing in the Western Division, the heart of tourism.
Yeah.
Many of operations in Viti Levu being closed, thousands not having their jobs. And then we've got now with vaccination rates up, Tourism Fiji and Fiji and Tourism Association, the government and other stakeholders now setting a timeline of starting things off most likely from December 1st this year. Of
Wow.
course, the line has been drawn in the sand with that date and with the vaccination rates expected to be achieved towards the end of October and November. How can you help these stakeholders?
I think our biggest thing is, as I said before, is telling stories, direct stories. So, you know, I sometimes, like when I first came back to Fiji in 2018, and we stayed at a few like amazing hotels. I think the hotels in Fiji are amazing. But the biggest thing everyone kept saying is what sets Fiji apart is the people. You know, I've been to Bali, I've performed in Bali, been to Denmark, I've been around the world. But the biggest difference, I think the commodity that people sort of like, that it gets lost in translation here when they are, you know, when they are advertising Fiji as a tourism destination, is the people. And it's the essence of what makes Fiji different. I had a conversation with a friend of mine that runs a big PR agency here. And she said when she first went to Fiji, which was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, um, when people would say hello Mbula as they were driving along the way, she at first thought that it was fake. She thought it was like going to other countries where, you know, they just try to push something. And then as they've, you know, as the days went on, they were there for about a week and a half. She said she realized that no, it was just the essence of what Fiji was, that Mbula was people actually genuinely wanting to know how you were and hoping you had a great day. And since then, they've gone back every year. Well, now that lockdowns happen, she's missing Fiji. But, you know, I think that's what's been missing is the essence of what makes Fiji different is the people and the resilience. Like even now through everything that's been happening, people are still excited to come out of it and to, you know, go back to work and to get this economy and get the tourism building up again. You know, and like the food and the small independent businesses that, you know, create things that we might not see necessarily when you go to a hotel, but you know that are providing things that the hotel then shares with the visitor. And I think that's the stories we really want to tell. You know, and there's some amazing brands in Fiji, amazing skincare and things that we don't ever see. I mean, like, and I think that's what I really want this digital magazine to start to share, is to incorporate it into it, including, you know, like to sit alongside other brands like, you know, massive luxury brands like Louis Vuitton. And but you know, why can't all the stories be incorporated into one, you know, one digital issue? And so that's what I'm really excited about.
You're talking about some big brands there. What have they said about your initiative?
We've had, so like I've been working with Hugo Boss for a while now, and now we're working with Prada. It's been really great here because, you know, for example, Hugo Boss came on board to support our Men Let's Talk event, and they've been great friends with us. And you know, I think the biggest thing that they constantly say is they're always amazed at how we're always trying to transition and create something new, but also within that, always making sure that we're helping and we're doing something greater than just a fashion or lifestyle magazine. You know, there's more to it than that, because otherwise we'll get lost in it. You know, and lockdown and COVID has shown us that there's got to be something greater than just an aesthetic. You know, fashion is great, but what does it do?
Arnott, you've been away from Fiji for many, many years. What are at least 3 to 5 things that you really miss in Fiji that you can't find anywhere else in the world?
Oh my God. Let's start with Nama. Missing Nama. Lumi, I see pictures online and have to unfollow people because I don't want to be seeing them cooking. I think the food is one of the biggest things. I miss the food. There's things here that you can't get, and we try and sort of emulate it, but it's not the same. You know, Lumi, Duruka, Nama, Mana, you know, all the things that I took for granted as a child in Fiji. Ota, we miss mbele. Like the other day, I just wanted boiled mbele with some fish. Um, I think I also really miss the people. Like I miss that essence of, there is a connection here, but there's also, you know, that that feeling of home that's lost. And now that my mom's passed away as well, I don't have as much of that connection back. So, um, I think that's why this is been a really big issue for me, is trying to connect Fiji with the world, or connect Fiji through the Rogue La Vie digital platform, is because I want people to know what it is that I miss and love so much.
Now, going into Sydney, of course, you did say at times you were going into events, you're the only person of color. In your own words, you said that.
Yeah.
And you said that it used to irk you. What were some of the challenges back in the day when you were trying to make something out of yourself, and the challenges that you may have faced that you may have not faced if you are not a person of color?
I think one of the biggest things is the presumption that, especially coming from like a smaller Pacific country like Fiji, is um, that you don't have the information or the knowledge base to be able to carry something off. I vividly remember first coming to Sydney, and I went with my mom to open a bank account. And at the counter, she said to the lady, my son's just come from Fiji, needs to open a bank account. And she said to my mom, and I clearly remember her words, "Oh, doesn't he speak English?" And that's one thing I love about my mom. She was very quick. She whipped around and said, "Actually, better than you, Arnott. Speak to her." And at first I was like, "Oh Lord, like this is shameful." But in that moment, I realized what she was doing. You know, she was breaking that presumption that that lady had about what she thought people from the Pacific were. And I'm constantly doing that, not as much as I used to. I think with social media now, people have become more aware and become more knowledgeable. But back in the day, there was always the "Oh, you speak English really well," you know, and I'd have to like turn and sort of, and I think because I had a bit of what my friends would call sass, I would always turn and say, "Actually, we learned the Queen's English. We were a British colony, not a penal colony. We were a British colony," and so that little bit of sass used to sort of carry me through. But then I also realized that there was this lack of knowledge that people had because the people didn't travel as much. And now that traveling has become sort of more accessible, well, not with lockdown, but and traveling through the digital screens. And I think that's why I'm so excited about the digital magazine, is because we can tell stories directly to people and firsthand. With a lot of the big publishing companies, a story might come in, but there's so many people it has to go through before it gets okayed. With us, you come to us, we'll read the story, and if we think it's worth telling, we'll tell it straight away. It's not getting changed or exchanged or edited down. So I think that's what makes it really exciting.
Anna, just taking you back to Fiji, the 3 to 5 challenges that you faced in Fiji while growing up.
I think being a creative kid in Fiji was a bit hard. My brother played rugby and that was fine, so he fit right in. But as a creative child, I was always a little bit odd. I read a lot as well. I'd walk around reading books in the middle of the street, and that was my thing. And I think being creative, sort of the challenges around that, were probably the ones that I found the hardest. Was I always want to sort of do things that maybe no one wanted to do. A friend of mine reminded me just the other day that I'd entered our school gospel into the newspaper competition, and I was editor for the papers. And of course no one wanted to do it, so I forced people that I knew to do it. So I think being creative was a big challenge. I think at times being mixed as well, because my mom was Kailama, my dad was from Laos, and we never grew up with him. And even though she made us aware of what it was, she made sure we were in the Volni Kaumbula, there was still a disconnect. And I think because I might have been, as a child, angry that he wasn't around, I didn't have that connection to tradition that I now miss. So I think that was another challenge is growing up mixed, because like you, sometimes I felt like I didn't, fit into anywhere. But as an adult, I realized that having both of the worlds was what made me unique and what made me different. And I could understand and empathize with either one. Um, I think not being very sporty, because everyone was, was into sports. And I think the biggest thing is, like, even though when I was growing up, I didn't realize was being financially, you know, my mom was a single mom bringing us up, and that was unheard of in the 70s. Um, and sometimes not having food, like at times we'd have nothing, and if it wasn't for my mom's faith and prayer, that got us through a lot of those situations. You know, yeah, I'm in awe of what she did with nothing. And I remember when she was working and when she was getting ready to come to Australia, and she was saving up for it. I remember we had bhaji for 3 months. And I don't think I could eat any more bhaji after that. It was curry bhaji, gisi bhaji, bo bhaji. But she taught me to make do with what I have, but also like the value of, of what you earn. So, there may be not a lot of challenges. I think the biggest one was just being a little bit different and creative, within Fiji. But I'm so happy that now when I do go back, there's so much creativity there. There dance groups, there's music groups, and it's really cultivated as well. Like it's encouraged and grown, and that makes me so happy.
Arnott, of course, you said about uh, having almost nothing and hard to survive. That is a story at the moment for many people with the second wave of the pandemic hitting us quite hard. 16 months for people who have been in the hotel and tourism industry. And times have been really difficult for a lot of people. With you in Sydney and COVID 19 also affecting Sydney and Australia and the rest of the world, what are some of the challenges that people there, including yourself, are facing?
Um, I think the biggest thing is losing work, because with everything that I do with my site, it involves people, it involves going out, it involves photography. We create content, but now that we're in lockdown, we've lost a lot of work. And we're lucky here in Australia that we have government to help us. We have government help, and that makes a massive difference. But I think one of the biggest challenges is for those people like me who live on their own, is not having the connection with another human person. So that's why I got really excited to do this interview, because I was like, I'll see someone. um, and I think is having that hope, not losing that hope, because a lot of people, I think, have really, they can't see the past the lockdown, and I think that's really been blocking them from, making the best of the situation. I just keep thinking, once we get out of this, these things are going to, explode. So I'm glad I have faith, because that helps me, but not a lot of people have. So it's hard. And I think the mental toll is what's hitting Australians really hard, and then getting past that. So we're organizing another, like a panel event, but it'll be digitally at the end of this month, at the end of August. Just talking about ways that people can cope with it. And I've been sharing a lot of videos on my page, on Instagram, where I've had people share their tips on how to keep your mental health in check, and to look after your mental health, because that affects the body as well. Like the beginning of lockdown, I had a really bad sore tooth, and I was wondering what it was, and I realized I'd been grinding my teeth in my sleep, and I think it was from stressing. But from Fiji, we don't outwardly stress about things; we hold it internally. So I was doing it internally, and then I had to learn, like, really focus on not worrying. And it's a weird thing to say, but breathing really helped me sort of think this through, and going for some walks. But yeah, the mental toll has been really hard for a lot of people here, and I think, and that's affecting the body, affecting everything else. So there's been a lot of talk around people looking after their mental health and keeping themselves in check and checking in on your friends, because a lot of things have been going. A lot of people have been really affected by that, and there's people, so the suicide rate's really scary.
And my last question is in relation to the future. What does the future hold for you, knowing that you trying to give back to Fiji now, trying to do more through the connections that you have, the connections that you've managed to cultivate and grow over the years? What does the future hold for you?
I'm excited because I think once things open up and people have been vaccinated and we can travel again, I'm hoping that the stories that we share from Fiji will give people another reason to visit, because, you know, I'm a foodie, and like I know a lot of people will travel to different places because of the food. And I'm hoping when we share these stories, um, about Fiji, about the food, like things like, when I came back to Fiji in 2019 for the Fiji Fashion Festival. When one of the hotels that I stayed at, I shared with the chef. I asked him. I said, "Oh, why don't you use more local food?" He goes, "Oh, I'm not sure we can get it." Just thought to myself for a moment, and I said to him, I said, "Oh, I need to show you a picture because I work with the Intercontinental Sydney, and the chef started using nama. I mean, they call it sea grapes here, but he was using it to dress his fish dishes." And I said to him, I said, you can get nama readily here. And I said, if it's the food from the Pacific is unknown at the moment, but I think it's once people get to know it, it'll explode because there's so much nutrition in it. Things like lumi, like people love creating sort of anything with a jelly content in it. Like imagine that in Sydney, like people will go crazy. I mean, people love coconut oil, and I remember growing up with it thinking nothing of it, but here they're like, you should use it on your body. It's amazing. I was like, okay. So even Lolo, like Australians have discovered coconut cream and they use it to replace, dairy for a lot of things. Um, and in Fiji, we have it so readily. And I think I'm really excited about sharing Fiji food. And recently, I was just watching the Pacific Food Revolution on SBS here, which is an Australian channel, and I got really excited because I was like, that's what I want people to see. I want people to see what can be done with the food in the Pacific, but also what's available there and how nutritious it is. So yeah, I'm excited to share more stories. I'm excited that maybe it can, to be able to come back to Fiji and have some nama. But also excited to see what we can do with connecting brands from Fiji to brands here, and um, bringing some of the brands over for people here to be able to purchase or to be able to get to know. So there's lots of opportunities, which I think is amazing.
Arrnott Salesi Olssen, thank you very much for sharing your story with us this evening. And of course, all the best in relation to your initiative where you're trying to give back to Fiji. We definitely will be in contact in the coming months and checking out how we get over things from the pandemic, finishing definitely with vaccination rates going up in Fiji, with most likely with fingers crossed and everything all good, that December 1st will see the reopening of borders for Fiji and tourism starting to kick in again. Thank you, and of course, all the best. We'll share the link of your online magazine later this evening. And any parting words from you for everyone who's watching?
Oh, please, stay in hope, Fiji, because I know it. We've been through, through the years. The one thing that I think sets Fiji apart is resilience. So stay in hope and share your stories with us. They'll share the link online, so you'll be able to go to it, pop onto Instagram, send us a private message if you've got stories, or if you think you've got a brand that you want to share with us. We'll be happy to hear from you. And God bless.
Vinawalevu and Modemata.